Welcome back, everyone. And for today's talk, I would like to explore the topic of nourishing joy. From the moment we wake up until the moment that we close our eyes, we experience different states of mind as we go about our day. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes neutral. And we cycle through feelings of happiness, annoyance, satisfaction, dullness, clarity, sadness, openness, tension, anger, gladness. And some days we may feel more stable. Other days we may notice more mental shifts, more ups and downs. So is it possible to change our mental states to more positive ones? You know, can we have more of these, nicer ones, right? It'd be nice to have more satisfaction, more openness, gladness versus the other ones that cause us more tension. Right? And if so, if it's possible to change our mental states to more positive ones, how can we maintain more of these positive states of mind throughout the day? To answer the first question, fortunately, yes, we can. Although it may seem difficult, it is possible to change our state of mind. If a negative state of mind arises for whatever reason, we do have the ability to shift and direct our mind towards a more positive state, or maybe initially a more neutral state, moving from a negative state of mind to a neutral one to then a positive one. The challenge lies in maintaining our positive mental states for longer periods of time. How can we nourish joy and other positive mental states so that they last and aren't so fleeting? So this is what I wanted to explore a little bit today in the time that we have. So what are our challenges? Why does it feel so hard to do this? To be in positive states of mind all the time? Okay, one reason is what's known as a negativity bias. And this is a natural psychological phenomena where humans tend to pay more attention to negative experiences instead of positive experiences. So we give more attention and weight to these negative ones, be it what happens to us or the types of information that we tend to see or seek out. So we're dealing with this inherent tendency to look at uh, the negative versus the positive. And not only that, not only is the brain more wired to pay attention to the negative experiences, one could also say that in today's age, with social media and instant sharing, there's greater exposure to negativity. There's more negative content out there coming at us in greater quantities and more quickly. You can see this on what's being featured in the news, right? Or the media or our entertainment sources. We can think about what we generally focus on as a collective, as a community. and what we tend to talk about with others. So, this is the reality we have to work with. How, in overcoming this natural negativity bias and shifting it towards more positive experiences. And you might ask, well, okay, what should we be thinking about then during our day? And here the Buddha would respond, good, good. Fitting that you asked that, because that's actually a question that he was asked by one of his cousins, Mahanama. Mahanama. I think. So his cousin asked the Buddha how his disciples occupied their minds during the ordinary course of the day. And he was basically asking him, what do the monks think about during the day? To paraphrase, the Buddha answered, when my disciples aren't meditating, they reflect on their good fortune, their own acts of generosity, kindness, and virtuous behavior. In other words, the Buddha's disciples occupied their minds with reflections on positive qualities and mental states. When they weren't seated in meditation, they were nourishing happiness and joy. So that is what the Buddha said about what monks dwell on. The Buddha then goes on further to explain the consequences of reflecting on one's good behavior and generosity. And he says, when a noble disciple recollects his virtuous behavior, his generosity, on that occasion, his mind isn't obsessed by lust or desire, in this case, hatred or delusion. On that occasion, his mind is simply straight, based on virtuous behavior, based on generosity. And what happens with this is that the mind gains inspiration, the mind gains joy. And when one's joyful, there's a whole sequence of events that happens. Rapture arises. And rapture in this case means intense joy. And when one has a mind of intense joy, the body and the mind then becomes tranquil. And then when one feels tranquil, one feels utmost happiness. And then when one feels happy, the mind becomes concentrated. So there's a whole sequence that happens when we start to reflect on positive qualities, on good experiences and good behavior. In another place, the Buddha talks about the inclination of the mind. Whatever one thinks about and ponders upon frequently becomes the inclination of the mind. If one thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, he says that that means that one has abandoned the thought of non-ill will to cultivate that thought of ill will. And so the mind then inclines to thoughts of ill will. If one frequently thinks about and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, upon thoughts of insert whatever state, right? Let's say anger. If you don't think about anger or thoughts that aren't filled with anger, one has abandoned the thought of anger to cultivate that thought of non-anger. And then the mind inclines towards thoughts of non-anger. So at the crux of this whole practice is mindfulness. in order to be able to maintain positive states of mind, we first need to know what's actually present. So what's in the mind at this moment or at any given moment in time? What thoughts are entering and what thoughts are we entertaining? Not only is mindfulness about just this neutral, open awareness, but an important part is also deciding what thoughts to keep and what thoughts to let go. So we can be aware of the presence of whatever comes into the mind and then be aware of what thoughts we're continuing on. That means that we were holding on to it and what thoughts we're letting go. Mindfulness in this practice includes being discerning about where we direct our attention. So being aware of what seeds we're watering. And we may not be able to control the states of mind that ultimately arise. So what we're really focused on here is watering positive seeds for the future. Because whatever we water today will be what grows in the future. So we can selectively water the good seeds and refrain from watering the negative ones. And this doesn't mean that we ignore our suffering, we ignore those negative experiences. We can still acknowledge, and actually, we need to acknowledge that pain and suffering. But here it means that we allow the positive seeds that are already there in us to get attention and nourishment. So sometimes the effects are more immediate. So we decide to read something good, like some good news, and we immediately feel uplifted. Or even the opposite, when we read some typical news, we often immediately feel some sort of tension or discomfort. Um, or when we do something nice for someone and that good feeling stays with us the whole day. Whereas other effects take time to grow. Like maybe you're listening to some teaching and you've probably heard that teaching 10 to 20 times. Sounds the same. Yeah, that's nice. That's good. And then one day you hear the same teaching and for some reason you just get it. Wow, it really sinks in. And so all this time that was already marinating within us, just waiting for the right conditions to arise for that seed to blossom. So I'd love to offer some practices that, as the word goes, we can practice to help us to ultimately maintain these more positive states of mind for longer. And the first is letting go. Whenever something arises, let's say a thought or some mental state that troubles us or troubles others, right? If it obstructs our clarity of mind and causes difficulties, and we let them go. We are recommended to abandon them. And this can mean moving away from it physically or emotionally. So let's say we're on our phones and we're doom scrolling. Very easy nowadays to fall into that. And then you start to realize, oh, great, I'm doom scrolling. So one suggestion can be to put that phone down, put it into another room, and physically distance yourself. It can be taking a walk, or if you're feeling a little down and out, take a change of scenery, go to the countryside or some beautiful nature. It may also mean establishing boundaries if you need to, right? If you're interacting with someone and it's just so hard to not feel angry or not feel impatient, then we have to consider doing things that move us away from that. We could think of something else. Also, we can redirect our attentions. So this practice is letting go and abandoning that which does not serve us. Another practice is that when negative mental states arise, we do its opposite. We try to water the opposite positive seed. When seeds of, let's say, desire come up, right, we then try to water seeds of generosity. When seeds of anger arise, we try to water seeds of patience. Same with ill will. We then try to move towards friendliness. And here, the opposite quality doesn't have to relate specifically to the issue we're dealing with. Here, we're dealing with just general states of mind that we find ourselves in. And it can be doing an opposite act, thinking about some other instance in our life where we've done the opposite. For example, let's say if you're feeling FOMO, right, the fear of missing out. Someone else is doing something wonderful, they're enjoying their life, and here I am, like, feeling miserable, quarantined, or whatever it is. The opposite act would be to think about things that we do have that are meaningful in our lives. So another practice is that when something good happens, be aware of it. Stop and savor it. So in that moment when we're aware of it, see if we can fully feel that. Feel how it feels in the body. Feel how that good experience is feeling in the mind. So we feel it and we nurture it. Really let it sink in. And we see if we can reflect on it often. So in this way, we're training the mind to focus more and more on that positive thing, to remember those good moments, and to remind ourselves that these moments, good moments, do exist. And bit by bit, we're overturning this natural negativity bias in the mind. A recent New York Times article on languishing and flourishing talks about savoring and celebrating the small moments. And this is really about acknowledging and appreciating the small moments of joy as they're happening, and then reflecting on them, which then helps to extend those moments of joy. So this practice is about maintaining a positive state of mind when it arises. And then lastly, a practice that can help us to train the mind to see the positive is the practice of seeing the good. So this practice is about actively reflecting on one's good deeds and qualities, and reflecting on others' good deeds and qualities. So this is a practice that I had the chance to do through the MMI program with some other friends here. And we practice this specific exercise daily. for 2 months. Right? We each had to write down one good deed that we ourselves did and one good deed that someone else did. And I was actually very surprised, but this exercise was more difficult than the other exercises that we were doing. And it was challenging to each and every day name one good deed, one good quality in myself, and also one good deed and one good quality in others. And over the course of 2 months, it started to get easier, but it was an active practice that I had to it didn't come and flow supernaturally. But over time, I noticed that doing it immediately shifted how I felt and my perspective. And in that way, it was a truly transformative practice. So this specific practice is about developing qualities of mind that may not yet be strong within us, similar to the planting of positive seeds. So just as a recap, these are some practices for nourishing joy. The first one being letting go, right? Abandoning the thoughts that don't serve us. Second is doing the opposite, replacing a negative thought with a positive one. Third is stopping and savoring, fully feeling, enjoying, and extending the positive experiences that we have at that moment. And then lastly, seeing the good, looking for good deeds and qualities in ourselves and in others. So we cannot really avoid negative mental states from arising, but when they do arise, we are able to do something about it. We can abandon that which doesn't serve us, direct our attention to that which does serve us, and practice to actively cultivate the qualities that do lead to positive states of mind. And with practice and with effort and diligence, as we continue to do this bit by bit, and we're not talking about big gains, we're talking about little things each and every day more consistently. And if we can do this, we'll notice that we're able to dwell in more positive states of mind for longer periods of time. And notice that it becomes easier and easier over time to tap into that sense of peace and these good qualities that are already existing within us, that which just needed a bit of nourishing to come out. So hopefully with this, that can leave us with some practices that we can do. And they're each practice in and of itself is big. So it takes time. So feel free to choose one that you really, that resonates with you at this moment, and practice it on a daily basis or on a regular basis, and see how that feels as you're doing it. And as you're doing it over time, how it shifts, if anything, in your mental states. I'd love at this time to send it over to our Q&A moderator.
Hi, that's me. Hello. Thank you so much, Vera. Can you hear me? Great.